As many of you know, we had to organize this webinar online because we couldn't be, we weren't able to organize it in Rijeka due to the pandemic. So the agenda will be presented by my colleague Sonia, who will just briefly inform you on what we have planned for today.
Okay, so as I said before, the agenda is packed. What we have in store for you today is to show you the work package 1 as it is. So far, it's work in progress, but what we have done is we have asked people who are working on these tools to present it to you. And then, hold on, I just have to admit everybody in the meeting. So we are starting by a small introduction, and here today with us we have the head of department Ivan Šarab next to us, who will speak about Rijeka as the capital of culture, and especially in how they're handling everything. Then we will go to the first tool, and actually just before that, Malgorzata will introduce the project as it is, and just to give us the context and the setting. After which we will then go into each one of the presentations for the tools. And I will please ask you to write any questions that you have regarding the presentation about the tools and to put them in chat. What I will do, I will note them and I will put them down so we can have a discussion when all the presentations are finished. We have agreed to do this because in a virtual way, it's a bit difficult to have directed and focused discussions. So what we would like to do is to take all your questions and then to put them in a discussion at the end of this webinar, if you agree. So please use the chat, and I will manage the questions, and we can then discuss them later on. We will try to close with the discussion, and we should be finished by 12 o'clock. Okay? Okay. Well, in this case, I will give the presentation then to Malgorzata.
Okay. Thank you, Sonia and Ingrid, for your introduction. I will just see whether I can.
Okay.
Okay, it is working. So good morning to all of you, wherever you sit and watch this webinar. On behalf of the West Pomerania Voivodeship, the lead partner of the project, I have the pleasure to present to you the ForHeritage project. The full title of the project is Excellence in Heritage Management in Central Europe. We are funded by the Interreg Central Europe program. We were selected in the last capitalization call organized by the program. The project started in March this year, and it has a duration of 2 years, and the total budget is 867,000 euros. In the project, we have 8 partner institutions from 4 countries. There is a comment here to use the slideshow in the full screen. It is possible.
Yes, please click.
I have to click?
Yes. On the bottom right.
Like normal presentation. Okay, Malgorzata, can you just take the fingers away from the keyboard?
Okay.
Okay, try now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sonia. So we have eight institutions from 4 countries, and in each country we have a regional or local organization, public administration, and a supporting institution. So in Poland we have the West Pomerania Voivodeship, and I can see someone here, Dominika, Ania, and Magda from the region, West Pomerania. Hello. We have Tomasz from the Foundation for Landscape Protection. Hi. Then in Slovenia, the partnership consists of the Regional Development Agency of the Ljubljana urban region. We have here Natasha. And in Slovenia, we also have the Institute for Economic Research. This is Damian and Nika. In Croatia, this is of course Rijeka city, Sonia and Ingrid, who are the persons directly involved in the ForHeritage project. And we have Irmo, Daniela, Sania and Andrea. In Italy, we have the city of Cuneo. We are happy to cooperate with Francesca and Elisa. And in Italy, it is also Finpiemonte, the regional financial agency. And I can see here Susanna. Hello. So from one side, we have the project partners, and from the other, we have all the projects. Sorry, I don't know why this changed. We have, can you try once again, maybe Sonia, to, okay, we have the next slide. And can you move to the next slide, Sonia? So we have all the projects we capitalize on. So basically, what we are doing in the ForHeritage project, we are analyzing and putting together results from previously EU-funded projects. And it might seem easy, but it's not easy at all. And in the last months, a huge work has been done to contact all these projects, to collect all the results and put them together. So we have some Interreg Central Europe projects, such as Restaura and Forget Heritage. We have Horizon 2020 projects. We have a project, also other projects directly managed by the European Commission, such as the FICOMPAS project IFISE. We can go to the next slide, where we can see other projects such as Sofia. Today, the Professor Michela Marchiori from the University of Roma, the scientific coordinator of Sofia, is with us. And also projects from Interreg Europe, and we can go to the next slide. And projects from the previous financial perspectives. So there have been already many excellent projects in the past with really important results. However, too often their results are known only to a small group of people directly taking part in the project. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the objective of the project. The ForHeritage project is willing to increase the impact of results from previously funded projects in the field of cultural heritage management in order to foster an integrated approach to heritage management. So with this aim, outputs and results from previously funded projects are analyzed, further developed and adapted, and right now we are in this phase. Then they are tested and validated, and finally rolled out. So we want to push results into the practice of regions. We can go to the next slides, where we can see the main outputs of our project. We are producing a set of tools on cultural heritage management, and today is the first time that the first version of these tools is being presented. We have pilot actions to test the ForHeritage approach, and then we have the regional concepts and the workshops for cultural heritage management. In the next slide, just to give you the taste of our territories and the pilots, we have 4 pilot heritage sites, 1 in Poland, 1 in Slovenia, 1 in Croatia, and 1 in Italy. So this is the, if we go to the next slide, this is the Benčić complex in Rijeka, Croatia. We will have a presentation on the pilot in Rijeka in a moment. In Poland, we have the Pomeranian Duke's Castle in Szczecin. In Italy, the Palazzo Santa Croce in Cuneo, and in Slovenia, the Wodnik Homestead in Ljubljana. So more information on the project is available on our website. We also invite you to follow our fan page on Facebook. And this is all from my side for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Malgorzata, for your introduction. Next up is Mr. Ivan Scharer. He's our boss, and he's also the head applicant for the European Capital of Culture project and founder, and the head of the Department of Culture in the city of Rijeka.
Hello to everyone. Well, we in Rijeka are living very interesting and complicated times. Of course, because of that sexy combination of capital of culture and COVID. And I'll make a short introduction about Rijeka 2020 and Benčić complex, which is the main topic of our participation in this project. Well, after 7 years of candidacy with 4 years of preparation, we started with spectacular opening at the beginning of February this year. And for 1 month, we really lived the dreams of a lot of people in cultural and creative sector in Rijeka. But as all of us know, at the beginning of March, we started with 2 months lockdown. We passed through a very, very complicated reshaping and rebudgeting of project because Croatia had extensive measures of helping the business sector, which killed a lot of public sector incomes to Rijeka 2020 project on national, regional, and city level. But somehow we decided to go on. We cut our budget to half, and today we have big press conference. We somehow survived this pandemic exercise. We had 400 cultural programs from June till now. Of course, without a lot of tourists, without a lot of cruisers, without a lot of international corporations. But we have to know that in next year there is possibility that Europe won't have any ECOC because all 21 ECOCs tried to postpone their capital of culture programs to 22 or 23, and ECOC project is passing through really, really hard times, and still no one knows what will going on in 21. Rijeka and Galway maybe will cover that winter and beginning of spring, but without some financial help from Brussels, it will be impossible to handle that prolongation of 2020 ECOCs to next year. But we have luck that important part of our ECOC was dedicated to urbanism and big investments. On this slide, you can see that dense situation in Rijeka city center, and we created two big plans. On the left side is Benčić complex, which is only 5 minutes walk from our building, from near city center and main pedestrian zone. And next months and years, in cooperation with you, we'll try to find new models of engagement and management of very interesting. Ingrid, help me, please. Okay. The Benčić complex was some kind of black hole in city center for last 30 years. This site is important because of two reasons. First is that this is 4 hectares, 200 meters, the big post-industrial area, which looked pretty ugly years and years before. You can see that 4 big buildings and some improvised parking lot in the middle, but with great ambition we produced in context of 2020, and with a little help from EU fund, we organized very complex plan of revitalization, and we are really successful because that big investments, which is around 35 million euros, which is the biggest investment in culture in Croatia ever, and of course the biggest investment in culture in Rijeka ever. We succeed in creating new cultural quarter with 2 museums, with new city library, with some interesting kids, cultural, educational, fun center on 17,000 square meters. And as I said, that price tag between 30 and 35 million euros, you have to multiply to compare with West European prices. I think that is somewhere between 70 and 100 million euros in Germany or in France. I think even in Italy, the price tag will be around 70 or 80 million euros. Well, this site is not so interesting only because it's city center. This is the place of starting modern history of Rijeka, because a few slides that can show ugliness of that place before. Our investment is not only about cultural infrastructure, our investment is about how to handle that crazy combination of big rains. Rijeka is famous of rainy times during the autumn, and in combination with high tide, it looked like that shoot on this slide. With this investment, we are handling even this problem. On this slide, you can see some interesting spring or creek or little river which is flowing in underground. A lot of complicated constructed tasks we had in this quarter, but as I said, we was successful, and at the beginning of 2022, when we will finish the city library, we'll have completely restructured post-industrial site with big cultural institutions and beautiful public square, which is important in Rijeka because Rijeka is really condensed without big public space, and this quarter will totally change the way of living in city center. Well, this historical industrial site is important for Rijeka because a lot of big industries had home in this part of city. First of all, it was sugar refinery in the middle of 18th century, in times when Austria Emperor decided that Rijeka will be same as Trieste in Italy, the royal free port, and at the same time Maria Theresa gave monopole to one big Dutch company, which in these times was the biggest private company in Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it looked like this. That is the famous sugar refinery palace, which is some kind of genius loci of Rijeka industrial history. It was big, monumental, Baroque palace from 18th century, and the main building in this industrial block. We, I think for 17 years, with small investments, with a lot of restoration, a lot of conservation, and that big EU project transformed this building to headquarters of City Museum with big permanent exhibition. I hope we will open it next month, but if we not succeed opening next month, I think till the end of the year, that beautiful new historical City Museum will be opened. The second building is new city library. Both buildings are big, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 square meters, and this building will totally change the way of consumers of culture living in our city. All of these investments are reconstructions with a lot of cooperation with Ministry of Culture, with conservators, with art historians, and after these 10 years long project, we really reshaped one part of town, as I said, with a lot of details which will preserve historical sites that in industrial history in Rijeka, and we in Rijeka are really proud of it. Next building and last one is that kids house. I think we'll open it in the same part of here as Sugar Refinery City Museum. This interesting perspective are showing the content of this building. It will be home of Department of City Library for Kids. Inside there is one multifunctional hall for puppet museum and for art cinema. A lot of space for workshops, for educations, and that interesting memory of chimney inside the house, which is Skylark. Skylark, something totally different from chimney. We are not producing some smoke or fog. We are putting the light inside this house and create good energy inside. This building looked like this 1 year ago. It was totally devastated, only with a shell of that bricks outside, but right now it looks totally different with these happy colors, a lot of light, and as I said, in a few months, kids of Rijeka will enjoy in really unique cultural center dedicated only to kids up to 12 years old. At the end, particular price tags for all this investment. As I said, with investment in public space and infrastructure, it will exceed 30 million euros. I think at the end it will be around 35 million euros. As I said, biggest investments in culture in Croatia. I hope so that this COVID situation will finish, then we can host you in physical space, not only in this Zoom situations. I think we are all a little bit tired of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. We have just one question from Leah. The question is, does the new City Museum apply modern technology? If yes, what? And just so you know, Velid is online as well from the City of Museum of Rijeka. So, Ivan, maybe just shortly before you leave us.
I don't know many details, but I think there are a lot of new technology. Not only in the City Museum, there is a lot of multimedia, there is a lot of interaction. Part of this kit house is dedicated to new technologies, to 3D printing, to audiovisual production, but maybe Velid can jump in with some help. I think interesting thing is that we are using that spring, that water supply in underground to cooling and heating all these buildings. I think there is maybe much more innovative than this content inside webhooks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to thank our boss, the head of the Department of Culture, and also the brain behind the European Capital of Culture project. And for this next part of the agenda, it includes tool package from the work package 1. So this is work in progress. And your input today as stakeholders or later via email is greatly appreciated. You can always ask questions via chat. Sonia will collect them right away. And I would now like to introduce Daniela Jelencic from IRMO, and she is the work package leader. She will tell us the benefits or the deviations and the goals of this next session. And also I would like to invite her to start with her presentation. I'm just going to give you, Daniela, the control of the PowerPoint. Daniela, you can now control the screen. Daniela, also please, when you're ready, unmute yourself, don't forget.
Sonia, Ingrid, are you there? There is a...
Daniela, can you try now?
Yes.
Now okay.
Daniela, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Rijeka. As Mr. Šarar said, you really reshaped your city with these interventions. And as Malgorzata explained at the beginning, the goal of the ForHeritage project is to revise previously funded projects and see if they have been done in a proper way. We have seen that a lot of funds have been invested not only in Rijeka but in numerous heritage projects funded by the various structural or other funds from the European Union. And the goal of this ForHeritage project will be to revise what has been done so far, and then to test it on the pilots such as the Benčić complex, and then to go further with the training and application of these this new knowledge all around the region and Europe as well. So just a few words about this work package. We have been revising different previously funded projects, or actually documents produced within these projects, and the topics which we focused on were good governance and participatory governance, public-private partnership in heritage, financing of cultural heritage, impact assessment, then revising different pilots, and training and education modules and programs that have been produced so far. So you can see the diversity of topics here. It was not easy because each of the project previously funded had totally different scopes, but the goal of these tools that we are producing now is to make them so easily readable and usable, therefore applicable for the pilots, in terms of cultural heritage managers as well as decision makers to be able to use them adequately. So I will now quickly go through what we have produced. IRMO, as the task of IRMO was to revise the participatory governance documents, and the toolkit we produced so far. For some reasons, I cannot move.
Wait a second, I'm going to try again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Click start. No, it doesn't work. Okay, no.
Yeah, it's working, you're moving, Daniela.
I am?
Yes.
Just can you put it in full screen?
Oh, it's good now.
Is it? Because on my screen it's, okay. Okay, it's slow. I'm sorry for that. So briefly, we analyzed the documents which you see on the screen. So just to save time, these are the documents from ForHeritage, Restaura, and Click projects. The Click project is still under, well, it's going on, so not all the documents have been available so far. So the lessons learned from analyzing these documents were briefly to make the documents as easily usable and applicable for the cultural heritage managers. So the structure of the documents and the style and the content was to be quite easily readable. So the approach we took that was that not one of these documents totally served the purpose of the ForHeritage projects, and we produced a new heritage tool, which I'm presenting now. The methodology we used was really participative. So we go by the motto, do what you preach. So as we refined the document on the topic of participatory governance, we wanted to brainstorm with the project team, within our own team in IRMO, and as well with the stakeholders, to which I am really thankful that they were so active in helping us in the refinement. So why did we select this topic? It is extremely important. So lately, you have probably seen a number of documents produced not only within the field of culture, but also we are talking about participatory tourism, about participatory science. So many documents produced. So it's the democratic society actually wants participation. So it's a necessary ingredient, I would say, of good governance. It's very slow, sorry. So just to define very briefly, good governance is the process in which stakeholders are actively involved. So participatory governance is actually a part of good governance. It is about strengthening the relationship between cultural heritage institutions and professionals and everyone interested, such as civil society, the public in general, owners, professionals in the protection of cultural heritage, business, etc., etc. So good governance includes all these topics which you can see on the visual on the right side. It involves inclusivity, transparency, participation, the rule of law, etc., etc. Therefore, it's a kind of collaboration. there are different levels of engagement, which they can go from informing stakeholders to supporting local initiatives. Informing stakeholders is just simple information sharing. Then a step further would be consultation with stakeholders, then deciding together with stakeholders or acting together with stakeholders. And the last and most empowering is the support for local initiatives. It contributes to both balanced and coordinated needs among stakeholders. It's a development driver. It contributes to better protection of cultural heritage. So there are a number of benefits why a whole array of participants should be involved. What our tool looks like, so after defining participatory governance, it goes with answering the question of why use the participatory approach, which I just explained. And then we go to a more practical side of the tool, how to involve stakeholders. So there are 4 steps. The first one, mapping and identification of stakeholders, then their analysis, then developing a communication plan, arriving to the establishment of long-term platforms. So stakeholders are not just involved to inform them and to work with them, but the question is that they should remain your supporters in the long term. So we have seen the example of the Benčić complex, and a lot of funds has been invested in it, but now it's the question of management of the Benčić complex. It's not only that it will remain that way, but every pilot has to think about how to involve other people, because this is the public money, and the aim of such interventions is for the citizens. Therefore, citizens have to have their say in the management of cultural heritage. Lastly, we present the evaluation of the stakeholders process so that we can go back and see if there were some mistakes. Therefore, the main aim of the tool was to provide basic information, how to support cultural heritage managers in the implementation of participatory governance tools, and to provide practical information definitely about it. So as I mentioned, step 1 involves stakeholders mapping, which means listing first the values and threats of cultural heritage, and then identification of stakeholders which are interested in it, then the ones which are threatened by the intervention, but then stakeholders responsible for planning, those affected by the cultural heritage, etc. Then the step 2, stakeholder analysis, first involves identification of their level of interest and influence, because not all of them are the same. And then to group them as partners, beneficiaries, or indirect stakeholders. Step 3, communication plan development, lists possible methodologies of communicating with them, such as telephone conversations, team meetings, presentations, press releases, etc., etc. There is a number of methodologies listed. And step 4, long-term platforms, lists types of platforms to work with stakeholders. It could be like a local supportive group, like multi-stakeholders platform, networks, social platforms, etc. As I said, lastly, we present the evaluation of the stakeholders process, and we try to do it all through practical examples. So giving examples which have been used so far, so that it inspires people. There is also the what if section of the tool, we have seen through the work with partners and stakeholders that when turning this into practice, they ask questions like, yes, but what if we called them and they didn't reply? What if this or what if that? So we, as much as we could, tried to answer these questions. So when coming to evaluation, we offer some evaluation questions for consideration, such as what could have been done better. And this is a very important step so that we can go back and analyze if there were some mistakes. General comment when producing this tool, the main challenges encountered were how to treat different target groups for this tool, because cultural heritage managers usually are more knowledgeable versus decision makers in this topic. So it's not the same. So we kind of want to refine it in future also with help of our stakeholders and external participants if they are willing. Therefore, it's somehow simple, and there are things that could be elaborated further. Then possible clustering with the tools should be done, as I can see it now. Possibly we could do some clustering with the public-private cooperation or partnership tool, and maybe impact assessment once we have it. Within the implementation phase, a challenge encountered could be that a short training of pilot managers might be needed. As we said, a group with stakeholders will be suggested in the learning phase. So this is from my side. So once again, I would like to thank my stakeholders, which already contributed to this tool, and the partners. And if anyone is interested in this topic, I remain at your disposal for further refinement of the tool. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for presenting us on how to engage communities in cultural heritage projects. Next up is Susanna Longo from Piemonte, and she will tell us more about financial instruments and innovative financial schemes. Susanna, I'm going to give you the control in 30 seconds. Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Okay.
Just click to the right. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So in my case, similarly to the presentation we had before, in my case, in the case of Piemonte, we had to focus on the topic of financial instruments to fund the interventions on cultural heritage. Wow, it's indeed very, very slow. Right, so as we all know, cultural heritage valorization poses an economic challenge because it is expensive. The cost refers both to infrastructural investment for conservation and renovation and to the regular operating and maintenance of a site. So the key questions that we tried to face, not to solve would be too ambitious, but to face at least through this work, were how to finance this kind of interventions, which financial instruments could be used, and which could be the budget providers to be addressed. The slide is not returning. Let me try again. Yeah, okay. As anticipated by Daniela in the previous page, we collected knowledge from existing studies, existing EU-funded projects and practices, and we tried to elaborate a practical synthesis that aims to be, or to become, because it's still in improvement, let's say, to become a sort of a practical guideline for public and private actors. It is articulated into three sections. One, providing a baseline knowledge on the topic. A second section portraying real cases as inspirational examples. And a third section on practical tips and recommendations that we derive from the lessons learned. The document, of course, was available for all of you at the registration page, so you will be more than welcome to give feedbacks in order to help us in improving it. The projects that we considered mainly to collect knowledge were the CLIC and the ROC project, that are two Horizon 2020 projects. IFISE, that was funded by DG Regio, and the Keep On and Finch project, that are Interreg Europe projects, all dealing with the topic of cultural heritage, and all of them somehow addressing the topic of financial instruments, but each in a different way. So how to fund or co-fund the cultural heritage initiatives? We can envisage 4 possible options, and the combination of the 4 would be the optimal funding mix. We can use grants and donations. We know them very well by now. They are not repayable. They can either be direct funding, which means providing money directly, or indirect funding, for example, using these grants to cover the cost for accessing to a financial instrument, for instance, covering the cost of the interest rate of a loan. Then we have the so-called, properly called financial instruments, that consist of instruments where the amount of money has to be paid back, and that could envisage a return for the investor. Then we have market revenues and fees that are generated by the sales of goods, of services, tickets, and whatever is related to the management of cultural heritage. And the so-called hybrid instruments, that are a combination of the 3 mentioned above, and that include and develop a risk-sharing mechanism. So which financial instruments? Financial instruments can be divided into 2 big families. One is based on debt, where we have a lender, a borrower, and an agreement for a sum of money to be repaid back within an agreed time. And the family of equity financial instruments that are based on a provision of capital to a firm that is invested, having in return a total or partial ownership of the firm. The investor can also get to have a management role in the firm and can participate to the profit sharing. And of course, in this case, the financial return depends on the growth and on the profitability of the business of the firm. We all heard talking about, I guess, innovative financial instruments and alternative financial instruments. But why are financial instruments in some cases innovative? They are innovative in the case that they are aimed to increase the volume of credit that is available on the market. And they are innovative because they go beyond the mainstream private financing mechanism that is often inaccessible, for instance, for companies for the most of companies in the cultural sector. Alternative in the sense that there are some new financial instruments emerging that are not going through the intermediation of banks, and they can be seen as complementary to the financing that can be obtained through banks. So we refer to private equity, mini bonds, crowdfunding, and in general digital financing platform, the so-called fintech, impact finance and payment by results, public-private partnerships, etc. Crowdfunding, in fact, is a type of fintech, so a type of bottom-up financing that uses the internet through a dedicated platform to raise funds from groups of people that share common interest. Crowdfunding is most applicable to the cultural domain, and the European Commission as well is promoting an harmonization of legislation at European level. We can see 4 different types of crowdfunding, depending on the fact that there will be a reward or not, or depending on the fact that a capital is provided to obtain in return a stake in the company. Impact finance is also an innovative, an alternative approach that can be applied to cultural heritage, and new experimentations in this sense are expected to come. In this case, in the case of the impact finance approach, the investor provides capital with the specific intention to generate measurable impact, and not only a financial return. So the financial resources are allocated in relation to some preset objectives and targets, and the return on the investment is tied to the achievement of such targets. In this case, impact is the primary purpose. And of course, then in this case, impact assessment is fundamental, because you need to be able to measure the impact you have achieved in order to determine the financial return. This is why impact assessment is one of the topics that we have been addressing in this ForHeritage project. We will talk about it later, because impact assessment is a topic that is highly debated at international level in order to find and define standard and shared methodologies and indicators. The most common instrument used in this case by impact finance is the impact bond, also called pay by result contract. So who are the budget providers? Normally and very often, cultural heritage interventions require to public funding that in the most of cases are used as grants, so they don't have to be paid back. Public funding can also be used, for instance, to facilitate the access to private financial instruments, for instance, by issuing guarantees for private lenders. Public procurement is another way for the public organizations to give money to the cultural sector, but also public funding can be used to set up financial instruments, in that case through the support of financial intermediaries like banks, funds and platforms. In a period of shortage of public resources, of course, we are registering an increase in the use of financial instruments by public entities. Grants are more and more combined with repayable financing instruments, and the aim of this approach is also to generate a leverage effect, meaning by that to raise additional money, additional resources from private founders. Public funding are also those coming from the European Union. Cultural heritage is widely supported in a wide range of European policies and programs, also programs that do not specifically refer to culture. And cultural heritage is going to be included in Horizon Europe in Pillar 2 within the cluster on culture, creativity and inclusive society. The European Investment Bank and the European Investment Funds are the two financial organizations at European level that manage some financial instruments through financial intermediaries. An example is, for instance, the Jessica loan that, as we portrayed in our cases, have been used in some examples. And there is a reference website for the access to finance at European level. Of course, from a policy design perspective, using financial instruments instead of grants can have some advantages, because funds are paid back and they can be reinvested by the public organization. The due diligence that is required and the fact that there is a repayment obligation may attract projects with higher quality. And of course, if we succeed in attracting and leveraging public funding, this results into a more cost-effective use of public funds. But still, we have to consider that different financial instruments have advantages and disadvantages that have to be taken always duly into consideration when programming to set up a financial instrument. Also, simply talking about management cost, failure risk, risk of financial loss, we have to be sure that the cost of setting up a financial instrument is really justified. And then also, regarding involvement of private players, how to conciliate private business goals and social, cultural, and environmental aims of policy actions. Private funders, we know them. So the philanthropic investor, we know they normally give grants and do not expect to have a financial return. But then we can also have banks and other investors that can be reached through alternative channels like funds, capital market, and crowdfunding. Tends to use financial instruments, expect to have a financial return, and typically operate through the instrument that is called investment fund. That means collecting capital from institutional or private investors to be invested into initiatives with high return and capitalization potential. In our document, we collected some examples, as I said, to be inspirational. So in this overview of what are the possible financial instruments to be set up, what are the possible sources of funding, and what are who are the founders, we try to give a more or less complete overview, and we provide some examples. Among them, I just highlight in the area of debt, public debt, the use of the Jessica loan in 3 cases. We also mention in the guarantees the cultural and creative sector guarantee facility from the European Investment Fund. And 2 examples as public-private funds in UK, the number 7 and the number 8 that I have highlighted. And there is also an interesting example of crowdfunding in Poland, just to mention some of them. But I invite you to read our documents, and you will also find links for further reading to get to know more about these examples. Of course, we collected in total 15 examples from Poland, Bulgaria, Italy, UK, and France. We tried to give an insight on these concrete experiences, on how the financial instruments were used, what were the objectives, how they have been implemented, and what results have been achieved when available. And we try to focus on innovative instruments showing private-public cooperation. These are just inspiring examples, because the replicability of experiences is, of course, always very limited. It's different in every regional and local context, and has to be targeted to the very specific local context. So to conclude, I think we can highlight 8 main tips and recommendations for the use of financial schemes in the cultural heritage sector. First tip, relate to the context. As I said, you should design the right instrument that should respond to the different needs of that specific economic moment. So you have to take into consideration the specific conditions of where you want to act. The institutional context, for instance, what is the market offer of the banking sector, the target, the stage of maturity, the eligibility criteria of the beneficiaries that you want to include. And you have to consider if your target is large enough to ensure the cost effectiveness of your action. And what are the risk of losses to be taken into consideration. And then the attractiveness for private investors. The second tip is to combine instruments. Financial tools should not be used as an isolated tool, but they should be combined with other services like advice, training, consultancy, in order to optimize the intervention, to increase its impact. The third tip is do not forget that you shouldn't only focus on conservation, but also on management. These are two different types of costs, and management of a cultural heritage could be, over the time, the highest cost to be faced. You should also consider that investment and operation may have different funding sources and so different management strategies. I'm trying to switch my slide. I'm afraid it's stuck. I can't. Oops, sorry, it went to the end. Okay, so the fourth tip is develop an holistic view. So take into consideration all the aspects involved by a cultural heritage investment: social, cultural, economic, environmental aspects. Because the best economic way may not be the best way for sustainability. An ideal conservation project may not respond to the needs of the end user. And the main goal you have to have in mind is to increase life quality and participation of the local community. The fifth tip is sustainability and durability. For your investment to be efficient, have a strategic plan to consider the durability and the long-term effects. Manage the complexity and adopt a strategic approach to be able to address the potential partners, plan the costs and the revenues, focus on the users, define a reasonable timing, because this also helps to attract investors, engage the audiences, and evaluate your impact. Define your impact evaluation strategy from the beginning. I'm sorry, again, but we are almost there. Huh? So the seventh tip, address private players. They are heterogeneous and they are a complex target. So you have to design ad hoc strategies to approach them. Consider that they may have higher or lower interest on enhancing culture with respect to their higher or lower interest on gaining economic benefits. Different type of organization may have different business models, so you have to approach them. And also they may not be able to see the added value beyond the economic one. So help them in seeing the psychological and social value of an intervention. And to do this, we recommend to include the local community, to enable a bidirectional dialogue between the local community and the private investors, because the local community is normally skeptical in trusting business investors. So creating a bidirectional dialogue should smoothen the process. And the last tip, and my last slide, consider impact finance. Consider if you want to try this approach to implement more innovative projects that should be capable of contributing to the improvement of the local social and environmental condition. Impact finance opens to new financing tool, alternative financing tool, and also in this approach, cultural heritage can find good opportunities for testing innovative projects. So thank you very much, and any comments, suggestion for the improvement and the enrichment of this analysis will be more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Next up is Damian Kavaš from the Institute for Economic Research in Slovenia, who will explain to us the dynamics in the public-private approach in cultural heritage matters. So Damian, just a second, I'm going to give you the power to control the presentation.
While Ingrid is doing this, can I also remind you to please feel free to post any questions. So far we have heard two presentations, one from Daniela and one from Susanna. And any questions you want to have them discussed with you, maybe you can just write up in the chat.
Damian, you should be able now to accept and control the PowerPoint.
Thank you very much. Best regard from my side. So I think there is a general agreement that in European Union that cultural heritage is really an essential factor of our identity, on one hand, and also a big potential for economic and social development on the other hand. But on the other hand, again, especially after the economic crisis, the availability of public funds is very limited. And that also hinders mobilization of private funding. So because of this situation where we have a lot of needs and limited financial funds, we have, one hand, try to use existing funds very efficiently. On the other hand, we should try to find a new financial potentials, and few of them were described by Susanna in excellent presentation. And the last one, we also have to find, we call it a new ways of public-private cooperation. So therefore, one of the questions which we raised in our project was, is public-private cooperation an appropriate method to ensuring the cultural heritage sustainability? And that's the main goal of our document, of our tool. So to analyze existing forms of public-private cooperation and give some recommendation how to use public-private cooperation in the revitalization of cultural heritage. Similar to other tools, we analyze documents which were produced in different EU projects in Restaura and Forget Heritage, Second Chance Act for PPP, but we also have to find a lot of other sources as European Investment Bank, World Bank, OECD, because the availability of literature in this field is really extremely limited, and is to a large extent linked to Anglo-Saxon world, that means Australia, UK, United States. So what we find out that there is no significant overlap between the documents, that they are dealing with the public-private cooperation or public-private partnership, and at the end, it's very evident that all those documents are not standalone documents. That means they are part of the comprehensive set of documents produced in each analyzed project. So because of that, we decided to define and develop new document, which will be some kind of guidebook. And believe me, it's not an easy task, and I hope that it's not too complicated, but the topic is very complicated. And public-private cooperation is a very important topic, but it's just one of potential approaches to the revitalization of the cultural heritage. So maybe the structure of the document, very shortly, we will start with introduction, with definition, how to use it, and then how to test the use of public-private cooperation. But what's is very important when we start that there is no consistent or any other definition of public-private partnership, and it's some kind of generic term which is used whenever representatives of the public and the private sector sit at the same table. So we are talking about PPP international cooperation, we are now talking about PPP in innovation development, we are talking about PPP when we talk about environment, we are talking about PPP in spatial development, where we are even talking about 4P, adding people. So we use the document or the definition developed in the Second Chance project. So we use so-called three different forms of the public-private cooperation. One is so-called public-private collaboration. What's important that we are having very short-term contractual agreements where we have some common goals, and of course the private partner contributes to the public culture activities. Then we have this classical public-private partnership. We have long-term contracts up to 40-45 years. Usually we have a special purpose partnership or a special purpose company or vehicle, and the task and the risk between the public authorities and the public sector are very well allocated. So until the end, we have the public-private joint venture, which has unlimited duration. It's very often the special purpose company, and we have a risk sharing. And very often this public-private joint venture is also part of public-private partnership. It depends on the context and on the project. So what is also very important, and that was already mentioned by Susanna, that we have different kinds of projects with a different content. We have on one hand some projects where we have a pure private interest. So usually there is no such big need for public-private partnership. We have so-called Class C projects, which are usually financed from the public budget, and there are pure public interests, but not always. And we have so-called B projects, when we could use the mixed funding, and this is usually the territory for public-private partnership. So very often when we discuss the revitalization of cultural heritage, we try to make this revitalization with the cultural activities. So we have three basic activities. There is so-called the program management, where we do have these program-related activities. And those are very often the subject of public-private collaboration models. And we did it in one of our projects, is the ForHeritage. Then we have so-called the property management. We are talking about design, building, operating, maintaining, financing. This is a classical PPP, but we have to stress that this is very rarely used when we're talking about the cultural activities. The main reason is that at the end, the project should be economic and financially sustainable. And if we want that the projects where we have the cultural activities are sustainable, we need a very strong public financing. And at the end, we have the general management. So what is public-private collaboration? It's very difficult to define. We know what is public-private partnership, and one of the main characteristics of the public-private partnership that we have very clear allocation between the public and private partner. But as regards the financing, we have a lot of different forms which was already described by Susanna, like the sponsorship, donation, patronage. But we also have the projects where the private, non-profit, or even the third sector is using the services or the facilities. So maybe just shortly about the public-private partnership. There are few characteristics. One of them is how the cash flow is made. Usually you have two different potential. One is user-based PPC, and another one is government-based PPC, but in reality, usually we have the hybrid financing. Then this special purpose vehicle, it depends, it could be 100% of private ownership, could be partially financed by the private with the major ownership, or by public. Then we could offer the whole set. That means from design to build, to maintain, to operate, to finance, or at the end, operational management. So a very short or just few function. And then we have a financing mix. because we should know that public-private partnership is an approach, and it's part of the model where we have a financing, we have a business model, we have a location, everything is linked in very complex and holistic approach. And what we could do it, we could make a new project, a greenfield project. We can make the brownfield project that is usually done when we're talking about the cultural heritage revitalization in urban projects. And it's one yellow field, it's a little bit more complex topics. We will not talk about this a lot. What is also very important, as I mentioned, those different projects that we can solve with the different approaches. And if we have so-called this C projects where it's a very strong public interest, usually it's used by the traditional procurement contracts. So it's a public approach. When we have so-called this A projects where it's very strong private intention, we use it with the privatization, and we have a big scope of different projects which are on one hand limited involvement like the management operations, on the other hand long-term concession. So it's the risk and the extent of private sector participation increased with the difficulty and complexity of the project, and that also influence the duration of the projects. So the PPP is based on PPP cycle. So it's very important because of their complex projects to follow the phases. So from project identification, with all those analyses done in first phase to the project preparation, procurement, and project implementation. And it's a long process, usually taking 2 to 3 years. It requires a lot of skills, a lot of knowledge, and of course, flexibility and cooperation and discussion between the public and private sector. So at one point of the project, usually at the end, after the feasibility study is completed, you should decide how to continue. So should we use the public-private partnership approach, and we need PPP suitability appraisal and value for money analysis? Should we continue with the public-private collaboration? Then we need the management plan, or we continue with the public procurement, or we just stop with the project. So to complete my presentation, so we are talking about public-private partnership. We don't have a real definition. What does it mean? The same is with public-private collaboration. So it's very important to use the same terminology. So what is also very important that it's an option, it's rarely used, but it's an option, and it's worth it to think about this. And the certain sectors are more naturally suited for private involvement than others. And I think what is the most important is that each project is very specific because it has different project characteristics. And there is also different national regulation, legal framework. So it's not a miracle solution, and it must be assessed on case-by-case basis. So, but it's worthy, and best regards from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damian. Susanna and Michela, I don't know how are you with your timing, but since Michela said that she had to go earlier, I would propose, if it's okay for you to give your presentation now, and maybe Natasha and Nika can please just adjust for a second and wait until you're over. Just 1 second, let me give you the control. Susanna, I'm muting you, so please answer me if it's okay for you.
Yes, okay, for me it's fine, and for Michela it's fine as well.
For Michela it's fine too. Yes, thank you, Sonia, for anticipating our presentation. Thank you.
Don't worry, I'm just trying to find your presentation. Just for a second.
Yes.
Oh, this is me.
No.
So this should be you.
Yes.
Susanna, will I give the control to you?
Okay.
Okay, Susanna, you should have the control now.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
fine. You can go.
Okay, thank you. So, me again, because in fact, FIM Piemonte was assigned to a second topic, not only to the topic of financial instruments, but also to the one of impact assessment. As I already anticipated, these two topics can somehow also be linked, so it does make sense to connect them. Impact assessment is a big question mark, I would say. So with our work, we tried to, and with this presentation, we tried to give some preliminary answers to the big questions. What is it, why we should do it, when to do it, and who can do it, and especially how to assess impact. In this case, we will be two speakers presenting this topic. One, of course, is me representing FIM Piemonte. As you know, we are a regional financial and innovation agency in Piedmont. We work normally on financial instruments applied to the many sectors of our regional system, which means that we are not specialized on cultural heritage, but we are indeed focusing on innovative finance, and we are approaching impact finance. So we don't have a specificity on the sector, but we are approaching the methodological aspects. This is why Professor Michela Marchiori from University of Roma 3, that is the scientific coordinator of the SOFIA project, is also taking part in this presentation, because the SOFIA project is specifically focusing on impact heritage assessment and on the creation of a social platform for a holistic approach to impact heritage assessment. So I will then give the floor to her to give you more specificities on this topic. So, few general concepts to start with, knowing what we are talking about. What is impact assessment? What is impact? The impact of an intervention is the difference between what has changed thanks to that intervention and what would have happened anyway. Assessing the impact means to try to establish and to measure to what degree an action affects certain changes in the society. So we have an action, we have some effects that can be positive or negative, they can be intended or unintended, direct or indirect. Through the assessment, we try to establish and to measure the causal attribution, the causal inference between the action and the effects that we have obtained. So impact assessment is not evaluation as we commonly intend it. Evaluation covers a wide range of relevant issues. We can see impact assessment in case as a sub-part of evaluation because it is restricted and well focused on only on some questions. It is a narrow evaluation, it is a narrow focus on a tightly defined set of indicators, and therefore it provides a narrow picture of the results that we want to see. Impact assessment is based on a predefined intervention logic, which means that it is based on the assumption that an intervention will generate some desired effects, desired and undesired effects indeed, and it is related to the theory of change. Cultural heritage impact assessment is an opportunity because it offers the possibility to measure to what extent cultural heritage can be turned from a cost into a strategic resource for a sustainable Europe. To do so, we will need to have qualitative and quantitative evidences, and this will allow to give more strength to the voice and the representativeness of cultural heritage in Europe. To achieve this objective, we need to develop a holistic approach that takes into consideration in impact assessment all the different impacts that cultural heritage can have. Cultural impact, social impact, environmental impact, and economic impact. And in this sense, this kind of approach can also support an integrated policy approach of these 4 areas in relation to cultural heritage. But why should we measure impact assessment of a cultural heritage investment? We can do it for several reasons. We can do it because, for example, it can be a legal requirement. In the case of an impact-based contract, you will be asked to measure your impact, or maybe also according to your national law, you might be required to demonstrate that you have a measurable impact. You can have external expectations from your stakeholders, from your investors, from your customers, or from your providers. They want to see to what extent your action has generated a certain impact. You can also have internal requirement, for instance, in the policy cycle, in public management, when you work on evidence-based policy making, or for transparency reasons. What you can achieve with impact assessment is to gain a knowledge on the process and its effects, to monitor the improvement of the organization, and to optimize the process in relation to its costs. These are all aspects that will especially help you in attracting investors. In fact, this is what I mentioned previously, impact-based finance. It's an innovative public-private type of contract and also type of procurement model in which the beneficial impact is valued together with the financial return. And as I said in my previous speech, we have some instruments, the pay-by-result contracts, the impact bonds, for instance. The aim is attracting investors that are placed in between investment only for impact, where the impact is the only objective, and investment where finance is the main objective or the only objective. In between those two kinds of investments for impact and investment for finance, there is an intermediate level of investing with impact. It's a blend between societal and financial values, and this is where investment is placed, and this is where we need to run impact assessment to attract investors. When to do impact assessment and who can do it? Impact assessment can foresee 2 phases: ex ante impact analysis. This is where we set the perspective of what an intervention wants to achieve or should achieve. It's like a business planning in the programming, but in terms of impact, of course. And of course, impact assessment is done ex post because it focuses on the effects of the intervention, and it can have short-term and long-term impacts. To do impact assessment, specific competencies are required for the design and the management of the methodology especially. So it is always important to have an external neutral evaluator that could validate the methodology and the assessment. And for this reason, impact assessment has a cost that needs to be considered. And now we get to the big question: how to do impact assessment? I don't have an answer, but what I can tell you from what I could read is that once we have defined our hypothesis of causal attribution, as we said, cause effect, we need to define a set of indicators to be verified. And each indicator will, of course, be measurable because it will refer to some specific quality, some specific aspect, and will have a scale with upper and lower limits. and that is where we start to do our assessment. We can run quantitative research and qualitative research, so we can both run a systematic examination of data, numerical data, statistical data, and this is mostly used to analyze the effects of an action on the economical aspect. For instance, experts analysis, literature review, case studies, and policy analysis. We can also run qualitative research with the objective to obtain a deeper understanding of the prevalent trends, not only based on statistical data. Both this type of researches can apply a participatory approach, participatory research method, which means involving the people that are affected by the intervention that we are measuring. The people, the civil society, the political institution, the local communities. In this sense, we are talking about also the counterfactual analysis. That is a method that can be applied, is for sure the most complex and the most expensive, and it is based on the comparison of outcomes between a target group, that is the one on which the intervention has an effect, so that is the one that benefits from the intervention, and the comparison group that is not exposed to the intervention. This, of course, enables to have a clearer attribution of the cause and effect relation between the intervention and the changes that take place, because this allows to measure what would have happened anyway, also without that specific intervention. These are my final two slides that are taken from the report of the Cultural Heritage Council for Europe report. There is a document that I found being very useful for this analysis. So this is only some abstract from it, but it helps us in understanding that when we start thinking about indicators for cultural heritage impact, we need to take into consideration the 4 potential areas of impact and, as a consequence, the subdomains. So, for instance, the impact in terms of creation of identity that stands both on social and cultural domains, or the impact on community participation, on regional competitiveness that has social and environmental implication, on the labor market that has economic and social implications. So it's a complex system, and many aspects, all the many aspects should be taken into consideration in order to get to elaborate effective indicators. And my last slide intends to give you just an idea on what indicators could be. For instance, if we take into consideration the impact on social cohesion, on community participation, and on the real estate market, if we take those 3 and try to think in a logic of possible indicators, what is the impact of a cultural heritage investment on the real estate market? It can be either positive or negative, but the positive impact could be, for instance, to increase the demand to live in that historical neighborhood, or the increase in the property prices, or the tax reductions for public owners that improve their buildings. And we need to search for measurable aspects. So the source of evidence could be taken from quantitative database or researches on the specific buildings and properties, and the correlation between prices and the distance from the cultural heritage site, for instance. Another example on social cohesion and community participation, again, we can have both positive or adverse impact, but in the case of positive impact, social inclusion, confidence, and well-being generated by the intervention, the sense of ownership, the sense of civil pride, the community engagement, the creation of new networks between the communities, and the creation of inclusive environments. How to measure all this? We can run qualitative research to capture subjective information from people. We can run surveys and interviews. So all this is to give you an example of how complex is to get to define effective indicators to measure the impact of an action on cultural heritage, and how many are the areas on which cultural heritage can have an impact. Sonia, Michela, I leave the floor to you for the Sonia project.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Michela, wait just a second for me to give you the control.
And also, just to let you know, we see when people are trying to get in the meeting, but if we touch the screen and admit them, we will take away the controls from the presenters. So what we do, we wait for the presenters to finish, and then we let them in. So just so you know. So thank you for all your messages in the chat, but we are aware of it, but just so we keep the flow, this is the rhythm we are doing it. Okay?
Michela, you can take control, and also I would like to ask everybody who's not speaking to mute themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all. I cannot take controls so far, so.
Yeah, Michela, you are controlling the screen.
Oh. Click undo.
No. Okay. Here I am. Yes, okay. Now I have the control. Thank you to all of you. Good morning to everyone, and thanks very much for inviting us as Sophia Project to your first workshop. I thank you very much, Susanna, for his masterful lessons that introduce us on the theme of the issue of impact assessment. That is the object of Sophia Project. I am Michela Marchiori. I am from University of Roma 3. We are the partner of a consortium of 7 partners, and we are the leading of the consortium of the Sophia Project. I am very pleased because today it is with us also Daniela Jelincic that has already presented. Ciao Daniela, her presentation, and Irmo is one of the 7 partners of Sophia Project. So I think that Irmo can be play a role of bridge together the two projects. In my short presentation, I just want to provide you some elements, only some, to better understand our project and its state of art. As you may know, our project started with a call launched by Horizon 2020, which was awarded to our consortium in July 2019. This call can be defined as a completion of policies on cultural intervention developed within the last 3 European program cycles. During these 3 programming cycles, it has been recognized that an essential condition that can contribute in order to assure that intervention on cultural heritage reach the expected and desired impact is systematic and constant monitoring of the process. Intervention should be constantly monitored in order to ensure that the desired and expected impact are achieved. So, in order to put in practice this principle and elaborate new methods and approach of impact assessment, a coordination support action was launched by Horizon 2020, and the SOFIA project won it. The aim of SOFIA project is twofold. First of all, to create a vast and diverse community of stakeholders from different fields and disciplines interested in intervention in historical environment and cultural heritage site. And today is an important occasion for us in order to enlarge our community of stakeholders, because I think, I really think that ForHeritage can become an important community to gather together our community of stakeholders. But the second aim of SOFIA is, of course, the definition of an effective impact assessment model, a standard of quality about impact assessment, and because the European Commission has an extreme need of standards that are currently missing, and guidelines for future policies and programs on intervention on cultural heritage. So we have a very, very big and challenges aims behind and in front of us. Who we are, a brief description of our consortium. We are a consortium of 7 European partners with different and multidisciplinary skills. The 7 partners are InterArts from Spain, EMA from the Netherlands, EduCult from Austria, NTUA from Greece, EADT from Ireland, and IRMO from Croatia, that of course collaborated also with ForHeritage. This consortium, and inside this consortium there are experts, very, excuse me, but I don't know why. Sorry for this problem. I think, I don't know. Sorry, because I don't know. I was sure to have spent my phone, and instead it was open. Sorry. So I said that the consortium, inside the consortium there are architects, economists, business economists, sociologists, and experts in cultural heritage. And so this variety of discipline is one of the reasons that allows us to tackle the issue of impact assessment with multidimensional perspective that is needed. Therefore, I would like to briefly present the main assumption on which we based our SOFIA project. First of all, we all know that intervention on cultural heritage produce impact, not impact, but impacts in the plural. Just before, Susanna said us that the community of cultural heritage at European level recognized the change in the concept of impact which produced a shift from the conservation approach to a more inclusive definition of impact that underline the multidimensional and holistic perspective. And also, ICOMOS stresses the importance of the quality of intervention to be intended not only as quality of restoration, but also the requirements needed to produce effective outcomes. The first deliverable of SOFIA that we have already produced and submitted is a survey on literature on cultural heritage impact that we have carried out through the use of multiple sources, that is policies, practices, of course academics and social platform. I cannot succeed in move ahead my okay, so sorry. Okay, so as Susanna has shown you previously, in the literature is now widely recognized that cultural heritage impacts are best appreciated in a holistic perspective. On a holistic perspective that is including at least 4 domains. We all as experts, as scholarship, as lovers of cultural heritage, we all know very well that intervention on cultural heritage produce effects, impact in all the aspects of human life. But recently, these impacts have been reviewed and rethought in the light of the content of sustainability, as the United Nations Agenda 2030 as teach us. Secondly, we we based our assumption, our SOFIA project, on a 4 assumption that is the following. And we know that cultural heritage intervention produce positive impact, but also negative or not desired, not expected impact. So we have to consider in our impact assessment model a way to detect not only the positive impact that an intervention on cultural heritage can produce, but also the negative on counter-effective impact that reconduce or that are connected with an inappropriate intervention. So in order to develop a new or an innovative impact assessment draft model, SOFIA project based on all these assumptions, and we have elaborate a draft of impact model based on this approach that represent a new approach to reason about impact assessment. our approach is based on 3 axes. Of course, our impact assessment model should be based on multi-dimensional approach, and we have to consider all the 4 domains of the impact assessment. But we have also to consider other 2 axes, that is a multi-stakeholder perspective, as previously Daniela Ovirmo well explained as the engagement of multi-stakeholder in impact assessment can produce and can advance the impact assessment of intervention. But the 3rd axis is to consider time, because we have to adopt a longitudinal approach. The impact assessment process has to be developed during the ongoing intervention, but also ex ante and ex post. Where are we with Sophia project? We have just produced a draft of impact assessment model. This draft is based, of course, on the cross-domain approach. We adopt a multidimensional and cross-domain approach that we based on the result of the report Count for Europe of the 2015 that Susanna previously presented to you. But this cross-domains approach was advanced, has been advanced in our consortium, because we focused on the areas of impact connected with the 4 domain, and we go ahead. Each partner developed the teams and sub-teams connected with each of all 4 domains. And in this moment, we have prepared a impact assessment draft based on 9 teams and 50 sub-team, and a very long list of indicators in order to measure the team, a sub-team connected with an intervention on cultural heritage. But the very innovative approach introduced by Sophia project is that of course, we focus on indicators, because indicators, as Susanna said before, are the measure in order to assess and to evaluate the intervention. But since we have the aim to produce an instrument very simple and very useful in all the different contexts in which impact assessment has to be realized, we focus our attention in order to for each teams and some teams in order to highlight, to detect the right questions that each evaluator or each stakeholder that make impact assessment have to ask in a sense. It is, which are for each teams the right question that we have to do in order to detect both positive impact, but also negative impact, or impact that produce something bad effect or non-desired effect. And this is a challenge that we have on front, because Susanna said how have to do for evaluate impact, and she focus her attention on indicators. Indicators are very important. Instruments are very important means, but before reflecting on the indicators, we have to reflect on the right question that each evaluator, each assessor have to do in order to not forget nothing when we have to do, or not forget the main important question we have, the main important issue we have to assess. So what are the first steps in front of Sophia project? According to the Sophia program, we have identified 12 case studies, 2 for each partner, and we are going to test our impact assessment draft model in order to verify the functioning of this model in this concrete case. And in conducting the case study, we use the multi-stakeholder perspective that is one of our important axes. But the other important aim and step of our project is to detect best and bad practice of impact assessment around, of course, on cultural heritage intervention and around Europe. I would like to conclude my intervention by launching this big question to everybody is presented, to all participate to this conference. It is very, very difficult to detect, to highlight best and bad practice on cultural heritage intervention. At this moment, we have collected only a very limited number of best practice and no example of bad practice. We launched to all of you this question, and we ask you to contribute to this aim, to this task, with any suggestion and any recommendation about this issue. And of course, all of your suggestions would be highly appreciated. Thank you to all of you, and excuse me, but I have to go to my lesson, and I hope to see you very, very soon and to collaborate together in order to advance the impact assessment model on cultural heritage intervention. Thank you. Thank you, Susanne. Thank you to all.
Thank you very much, Michela, for participating, and thank you for explaining the Sophia project. Thank you for taking the time. We will continue with Natasha Marshall. Just 1 second, please. So Natasha Marshall is our next presenter from Slovenia, also Regional Development Agency of the Ljubljana urban region. Natasha will talk about ex-post analysis of workshops and training materials from previous projects on which ForHeritage is based. Natasha, I hope you're following us.
Yes, I'm here. I'm just waiting for my presentation. So as we move,
Natasha, I will Just 1 second.
Yes, as we moved from the mornings to the afternoon, I'm saying good afternoon to everyone. And I'm informing you that we are also moving to a bit lighter themes. So thank you, Ingrid, for your introduction. Yes, I am going to speak about training, and as Susanna mentioned in her presentation, education has economic, social and cultural implication, and of course also trainings. We all know that long life learning is really a must nowadays for successful work. So I'd like to present you these guidelines that were prepared based on previously reviewed projects, and yeah, I cannot move further now. Okay, thank you. So the main question that we wanted to answer in these guidelines is how to organize a successful training for better management in the cultural heritage sector. And as all these training materials and workshops from Forget Heritage, Restaura and Diffuse projects were very different in their scope with regard to aims, contents, and target groups. We didn't prepare a new document, but just these guidelines to provide you with some practical information, recommendations, and hints about organizing training sessions for better management and or financing also of cultural heritage sites, because all these project partnerships, they did give some recommendations. They have some common denominators, and so I will present them later on, and also they are extensively present in the document itself. So we know that constant update about novelties in our fields of work are very important, and not only in the cultural heritage sector, also in the sector of culture and creative industries, because they are both facing the in the last years the lack of financial means, as well as in public sector and also in the private sector. As I mentioned already, new guidelines were needed, and to be as practical as possible and they are, I hope also that you will find them helpful when organizing something at your work. And because there are also good practices, lessons learned, and they are leading you step by step. As we know, for successful training programs, 3 phases have to be done and completed. The preparation phase, then implementation, and at the end also evaluation, so that we know what went well and what could be improved in future. So in the prevent activities, I'm sure you know all these, but just to recall, let's say, you need an organizing team, you need to draw a timeline, define objectives, teams, experts, what kind of target groups you would like to have, or any challenges. Then identify training needs. This can be done in different manners, by online questionnaires, focus groups, or interviews. Then you define training goals, knowledge participants will do, which skills they will improve, and then the next step is training program development. I would recommend that you develop the training program together with chosen instructors or experts or mentors, when you choose an expert, he has to have good knowledge and experiences in his field or her field of work, and also the person should know should use the modern training tools, and of course to be a good presenter, speaker, to engage and attract people, participants. Then, of course, equipment is needed, and in this phase, also you should define and decide on the tool for evaluation, so that you know how you are going to approach. When you have the key elements of of a training program, then you start with promoting it. Then activities on the day, as you know, we always check the venue, that everything works. Then the whole process of implementation, the knowledge is delivered. And of course, everyone should be involved in organization and also implementation. The whole, both teams should be flexible and ready for changes on the spot. And don't forget to make photos, just because good photos are also good promotion. Then, as I mentioned, evaluation is necessary. Here are the main, relevant questions that you could raise, but it's important that you evaluate the sessions with participants and trainers, and also with your organizing team, so that you know what could be improved or what went well, and how can you approach next time. As we all know, this year physical activities, meetings and events have moved online due to certain issues worldwide, and therefore some webinars were organized. Here I'm mentioning just two organized by the Joint Secretariat of the Interreg Europe program, and they gave really good suggestions, recommendations and guidelines how to approach, how to organize, what is crucial, what is important, and to organize what is distinction, for instance, between webinar and meeting, and also with what kind of questions should be asked before choosing a corresponding tool. If I turn back here to this slide, you can see also two links. They are both leading to the list of possible tools. Well, the first one is list. The second one is more in-depth explanation, what kind of tools, for which purposes, and so on and so forth. So from also, let's say here you can see 5 steps that should be considered when organizing a webinar. And as I mentioned before, these guidelines are also giving good practices are listed. For instance, I mentioned some already, that training should be led by professionals in their field, and maybe this is very important what we found out, because in the Forget Heritage project we had it was actually let's say, asked or planned that participants should be divided in 3 target groups, like training sessions for public administration staff, then for CCI operators and for pilot managers. But as we found it, they were all interested in all training sessions, so they were mixed. And more important is to have 2 groups, 2 levels, let's say, beginners and advanced learners, because they have different experiences, or actually beginners sometimes no experiences in certain fields, and so this is better, I would suggest. Then, of course, theory should be upgraded and not upgraded, maybe mixed with many practical informations and inspiring examples. And when possible, and if possible, it's also depending on your needs and budget as well, organize a modular training with several sessions, because it's more, let's say, user-friendly, and participants can decide to which lessons they can go, to which sessions. Well, be careful about timing when you organize it. And also pay attention that when speaking and facing this public-private partnership, and all 3 different kinds of that Damian was mentioning before, that there is still a great fear in local communities because of bad experiences in the past. This I can say, at least it's valid for Slovenia. Okay, then we go further to lessons learned. Well, the main, the common lessons learned are actually similar than good practices. But here I'm mentioning some specifics according to all these 3 projects. So, of course, it's beneficial for all this transnational cooperation, but it should be always adapted to a local legal environment. It's not possible to have copy-paste issues, methods, or whatever. So raise awareness among SMEs about great potential of cultural heritage. It was already mentioned in previous lectures today. And as I said, it was a good thing to mix all these target groups. Why? Because they learned each other's language, and they got a deeper understanding of each other's needs and maybe demands, and it's good. It's easier to meet than each other's requirements. And it's much easier to work with and cooperate. So, as we know, day-to-day management of cultural heritage site is a very wide topic. So an array of topics needs to be addressed, and for really good management. And don't forget that lots of efforts and time are needed for public procurement procedures, and also when planning a customized pilot training on financial instruments. This is from IFISA project, and I believe it was quite challenging to make this tailor-made modular training. And it was mentioned already also, there are no adequate responses to specific financial needs for social enterprises, and I can add it's similar in the sector of culture and creative industries. And and the challenge is also the common understanding of terminology, because as we face it also, I can say based on my previous experiences, we don't understand the same under each phrase or each term. I think that the main challenges will be or may be these financial issues. I know that Susanna did really a good job and with presenting, with studying and analyzing and preparing these both tools, but I'm still, I'm a bit, not that I doubt, but I think it's still challenging, very challenging, how to prepare innovative financial schemes, which are for sure needed also in the cultural heritage sector. But financing and day-to-day management of cultural heritage sites is not that easy. I can tell you based on the experiences with cultural heritage pilot managers, and they have very creative way of financing. This I can confirm, very creative and alternative. And speaking for Slovenia, crowdfunding is widely used. I can confirm that, but it's not for all cases. At the end of this training tool, we have listed or we have done benchmarking of all three projects, because they are very they are quite different, as I said before, with they vary at aims, target groups and methods used, and also which kind of public-private partnership form was used. And so then you have structure, you have some examples of structure, of trainings, of agendas, of evaluation forms, and some practical tips at the end. So with this, I would conclude my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And of course, I'm on disposal for any questions, and I'm giving back the mic and everything to Ingrid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha, for your presentation. And I would like to introduce you now to the last presentation from Nika Murovec. She works at the Institute for Economic Research in Slovenia, and she will also present us learnings from our previous pilot actions. So Nika, please, I will give you the power to take the presentation.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so hello to everybody. This will now be the last presentation of the tools today. So I hope we haven't lost the attention of everybody by now. I promise to be short. The document or the tool that I will be presenting was prepared together with my colleague Damian, who already presented the document on PPC. For the preparation of this document on pilot actions, we analyzed the available documentation on 12 pilot actions, which were carried out within the Forget Heritage and Restaura projects that you already heard about today. This documentation included descriptions of pilots and their activities, as well as different monitoring and evaluation reports. Besides that, we of course also included some additional project and other documentation as well. The analysis of this documentation soon revealed that the pilot actions were very different. The first difference is in terms of size, be it the size of the investment or the size of the pilot site. Then the second difference is in terms of the pilot context. And then, of course, there are differences also in terms of the focus, whether this is the focus of the project activities, as well as thematic or content-related focus. The next conclusion was that there are also big differences in terms of quality of the provided project documentation. The quality as well as the quantity of information which was provided in this documentation varied a lot. And in some cases, the information was even difficult to understand for us due to poor quality of the language that was used. Nevertheless, it was more than clear that pilots are a useful tool for testing new models and concepts of heritage revitalization, since they enable a lot of learning and experience gathering. The analysis of pilot documentation also showed that there are some recommendations which are more generally applicable, but that there was so far no existing document which would enable the reader a quick overview of such recommendations. The methods that were used in the analysis were pretty much the same as were already mentioned by others. So not to repeat too much, the conclusion was that a new document should be prepared and that this document would have to be short, transparent, and understandable also to readers who are dealing with these topics for the first time. Then that the document should provide recommendations which are more widely applicable and that are based on the analysis of good, but also not so good practices of the previous pilots. And finally, due to big differences in pilots, that this document should also contain a short but clear overview of basic information about the pilot projects which were analyzed. Go a bit more into the topic. Here we first have the definition of the pilot projects as was given by the Interreg Central Europe program. As you can see from this definition, pilot projects are important for effective management of cultural heritage sites. This is firstly because they enable testing of cultural heritage revitalization approaches that are new or that present a novelty just in a specific environment or context. Also, what is very important is that pilot projects allow for certain mistakes, which means that they can really present an excellent opportunity for everybody to learn and accumulate their own first-hand experience. Besides all that, pilot projects also serve for raising awareness about the new approaches. If we have a pilot project behind and not just theory, it is of course then much easier to share information about this new approach within the professional as well as within general public. So when testing new approaches in a specific context, it is of course also reasonable to learn from the experience which is acquired in other similar projects. In that way, you can build on good practices which are already proven and attempt, of course, to avoid potentially challenging activities and situations. If I very shortly present the content of the document, as I said, summarizes the experience from past pilot projects, which were also dealing with cultural heritage revitalization. The purpose of this document is to provide a more transparent overview of good practices and recommendations, which are applicable either to a wider or to a clearly specified context. As far as the structure of the document is concerned, of course, first we have a short introduction, but then we go straight to practical recommendations. The recommendations are organized in a way that we first provide some general principles which should be followed by everybody, such as, for example, that pilot sites should be small scale, or at least divided into smaller units which are more manageable. Then that you should be flexible, expect changes of plans, and be prepared for different scenarios. Then we have the importance of good and open communication throughout the project, and so on. Then, after these general principles, we have recommendations organized according to the basic stages of the project life cycle. The purpose of this is that you can easier find what is relevant for wherever you are in the project at the moment. So that, for example, if you are in the first project initiation phase, you know that you need to pay attention to what kind of a project team you form, you build a cooperative approach, as we also heard today, from the very beginning of the project, or that you can find recommendations on how to develop the project concept and carry out the first necessary analysis. Then if you are in the project planning phase, you can find some more general recommendations regarding the preparation of the management plan. And then similarly, we have some recommendations for the project implementation phase. Here you should never forget, for example, the importance of monitoring and evaluation, which is often left out, unfortunately. Then finally, we have a project closing phase, where we stress out the importance of the transfer of all gathered knowledge. And since learning is one of the main purposes of the pilot projects, it is very important to transfer also challenges or problems that you encountered. As we heard also before in the presentation of the Sophia project, it is bad practices can be very useful, but it's difficult to find them. So it's important that we don't try to present others a perfect image about our project, which is unfortunately often not really realistic. At the end of the document, in the appendix that is, we also provide a short overview of all the analyzed pilots, according to some basic information about the pilots and about their context. In the process of preparing this document, we also encountered some challenges, of course. The first challenge is related to the fact that each pilot is a story of its own. As I already mentioned at the beginning, the pilots that we analyzed were very different. But it's not just the past pilots, it is also that any future pilot or pilot managers which may want to use the recommendations that we present in the document, they are faced, of course, with a unique set of circumstances. This means that despite the fact that we tried to include only more general recommendations into our document, it may be that not all are applicable to your specific case. And the second issue is that the recommendations which we could draw from the available documentation on pilots and that are more or less transferable do, of course, not cover all the necessary steps for pilot project implementation. This means that the document is not to be mistaken with the management manual, and that because of that, you need to use some additional literature on project management, for example. In cases where our document was overlapping with other already presented ForHeritage documents, which are focused more on a specific topic, we tried to solve that so that we have put in a reference to the more relevant document on this topic. So for all these reasons, we believe that our document can be very helpful, especially in the starting phase, that is, when you are entering a new territory, new projects. However, it should serve only as a starting point for your own and further work on pilot projects. Despite the fact that the differences between pilots and their contexts presented a challenge for us and also for the preparation of this document, at the same time, this is exactly the major reason for the use of pilot projects as a tool. So to conclude, I would once again like to stress out that first-hand experience is irreplaceable. So wherever this is reasonable and where it is possible, pilot projects should of course be used. Thank you for listening, and of course you are all invited to read the document. It is also not very long, I promise.
Thank you very much, Nika. We have come to the end of our presentations. So now we have left the part with the discussion, and everyone who wants to ask a question is invited to freely do so.
Guys, let me just point out, I did not receive any presentation related questions. So while we put this slide on, maybe think about if there is something you would like to ask the presenters while we are still online. I know we took up more time than we promised, so I understand if you guys need to leave. But this is a unique opportunity, but also because we are recording this, we will be free to propose to share with you the presentation that you saw, but also if you would like to share the recording, you're able to do that. We will share the link at the end. So any questions in the next minute or so, and then we would be ready to wrap up. Okay, so we have a first question. And I think it doesn't only work for one tool, but maybe to all. So all of the presenters who feels like answering, please try answering this question. Did you try the method only in the case of theoretical projects or also in physical revitalization? Did you try the method only in the case of theoretical project or also in physical revitalization?
If I may.
Yes, Daniela, you may.
Okay, thank you very much, Leah, for posing this question. So as you probably heard, the method which we applied referred to the analysis of the existing documents of the projects which were previously funded by different EU instruments. So we had to analyze the documentation, right? Although these projects, some of them focused also on revitalization projects. So not necessarily on the works like the construction, but preparation of different documents such as in Restaura projects, etc., etc. So in my opinion, it should work both for the revitalization, but also for the soft projects, I would say. So as the next step is the testing of the documentation we have done on the real cases, as you have seen within the ForHeritage projects. We will see how it works more or less on the management side, but not so much on the revitalization.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Leah.
Yes, I would like to say something.
Yes, Natasha, please.
Based on ForHeritage project, and because we had also pilot projects there, 8 pilot projects, and in some of them had minor investments. Let's say like in Ljubljana, Vodnik's homestead. That means we set up a co-working place and for writing. And for instance, only a part of electricity, some new plugs were added, heating system was a bit, they were changed, or minor changes of the floor. I mean, part of the finances were from the EU funds, from the Central European program, sorry, but the rest were provided by the owner of the heritage building. And the same was in other places, because there were in other cities, there were eight pilot sites, and one was also in Rijeka, and then in Poland 2, and in Italy 2 sites, and in Germany. Then part of the finances was dedicated to the minor investments, and part to the equipment. So we bought, for instance, in our case, we bought computers and the necessary equipment, so that people come in to this co-working place, that they could use. 5 places were prepared.
Thank you, Natalie.
So minor investments in our case.
If I may, shortly, I'm not sure if the question is referring also to the tool that I presented, but whoever is interested in the practical application, this tool is based exactly on that, on real-life pilot projects. Some of those projects were more focused on preparation of documentation, but then, as Natasha already said, there are also projects where some infrastructure works were done, and also projects that did a lot of work on content. Not only restoration, but really revitalization as we understand it. Thank you.
Thanks, Nika. We have one question from Yanis. Yanis wrote, he was asking whether there would be prime tools, maybe like top 5, for the cultural heritage project sustainability in the era of pandemic and recession in public and private sector of the economy. I guess this is a great question to everybody and anybody. So, but maybe, I don't know, Daniela, would you be willing to maybe give it a go?
Yeah, well, I can start. This is something which really bothers our soul involved in heritage in some way. So heritage sustainability is definitely something we should think about. And as I said at the beginning, the presentation of the Benčić complex is a good example of that. Not only for being part of the ECOC project, but affected just generally by the COVID-19. So the thing is, it's very difficult to say like this is the top 5 topics which would be best to be used in fighting the pandemic. Because the whole thing is with COVID-19 is very unknown. This is totally new to all of us. However, as we all responded with fast measures to save the jobs and the heritage itself, I think the topic number 1 would be definitely financial instruments. And this is how the whole Europe and the whole world actually responded with providing some financial injections just to save the jobs and the infrastructures and activities as much as possible. However, I would like to point out that all of the topics are extremely important, because what we came up with during this task, that the heritage revitalization and management is an extremely complex process. So it involves everything. So while everybody was talking, I tried to summarize a bit and to see what the challenges could be for all of the topics. And as much as we can see some overlaps with, let's say, participatory governance, with impact assessment or public-private cooperation, or some overlaps of financial instruments in terms of implementation and pilots, etc., etc. We see that all the topics are definitely important, since financial instruments obviously sometimes also involve public participation or public-private cooperation. So it cannot be that a single topic can be individuated and say, let's all focus on financial instruments, because sometimes involvement of your stakeholders or involvement of citizens or private investors could be at the same time as much as important as the financial instrument itself. So this is from my side. I don't know if others have other views, but this is how I see it.
Thank you, Daniela. Does anyone else want to add to this answer in terms of Yanis's question? Okay.
I just want to say that I fully agree with Daniela. So it's coherent, it is interrelated, and what we need now is some money, and I think the public money. Thank you.
Thank you, Damian. This is recorded and will be shared with the Joint Secretariat, so just in case anybody's listening. Well, guys, I think we really came to the point where we are agreeing and understanding what we are listening. Thank you so much for being ready and being technically apt. We have one more small message in the chat. And here Anastasia is writing, dear all, I'm writing from Fondazione Circolo dei Lettori, a cultural institution from Torino, aimed at promoting culture through education to reading. We have been invited by City of Cuneo, and they're thanking us, and they're hoping to meet. And this is also what I would like to say, and maybe invite Malgorzata to greet us all, because this is a Zoom conference, but we're definitely hoping that this might be one day face-to-face.
Thank you, Ingrid. So at first, I'm happy that thanks to the online character of this event, we had more than 50 participants in this webinar. You have listened to 6 presentations, 6 tours that have been prepared within the ForHeritage project. And I invite you to read the documents that are available online, and you can send us any suggestions. Maybe you are aware of any other good practices, interesting projects, for example. And thank you for your participation. And I hope you will participate also in the next events we will organize within our project. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stop recording.
Bye-bye.